The second part of Reel 2 starts as we continue on the second leg of our trip, this one from Montreal to Quebec City. We had been in Montreal to visit the US consulate there. I already had a job offer from General Motors. Wendy and I both needed green cards so that we could move to the United States to take up that offer. Pretty severe winter, even by the local standards. Here we see snow that was picked up from the streets of Quebec City being dumped into the St. Lawrence River. We went for a ride in this horse-drawn sled. You can see the weather was severe. The driver was wrapped in this very large, thick fur. Wendy and I kept joking that it probably came from the mother of the horse that was pulling us. This was a very special experience to be pulled in the sled through the historic city of Quebec. There we see the Chateau Frontenac, quite different view from seen earlier from the Empress of Canada as we sailed up the St. Lawrence in August. Going under one of the many gates leading into Quebec City. It is one of the oldest cities in North America. It was fortified with the wall. And there we see the overall scene of the sled. We're taking a ferry from Quebec City, which you see in the background there, to a town on the other side of the St. Lawrence called Levis. We're in a ferry that took passengers throughout the year all the time. We were there as tourists. Other people were traveling for normal business sorts of reasons. It was a wonderful ride. The cost was transportation costs, fairly minimal, not tourist costs. There's the sister ship going in the opposite direction. These ferries just kept pumping across all day long. And there's the view of Quebec City from Levis. We're in Levis. This really caught our attention, this deep, deep trench that had to be cut in the snow. Ferry, Cité de Quebec, coming in to be moored at the dock. And this one leaving. And now we are on board on our way back to Quebec City, and there is Mum with that marvellous Voigtlander Vitamatic 2A camera that I purchased in Belfast for £58 sterling in 1960. It eventually broke down, which was a very sad experience for us, because Mother loved that camera and I loved it. In those days, one had just one camera and one movie camera. In today's money they would have cost about $1,000. So you didn't have a whole bunch of them lying around. It was a special possession. All of the early pictures on our web were taken by that Voigtlander Vitamatic 2A camera. I loaned it to Mother when I first went to Ottawa. She took some of those marvellous pictures in Oxford that you can see on the web. This is Montmorency Falls, a tourist stop on the way between Quebec City and Montreal. Everybody told us we just had to see it, and of course they were absolutely right. Here's Mother climbing up a snowbank, very deep. Fortunately, she has very, very high boots on. It was cold, as you can see. And of course, don't forget that we were mighty young then, 1967. I was 28, and Mother was 24. So we were a lot more hardy than we are today. Driving home to Ottawa, can't identify the bridge. But you can see our Morris Oxford car that we had taken on this long trip from Ottawa to Montreal to Quebec City. And here we're passing the site of the forthcoming Expo 67. This is February 1967. They're getting it prepared. That was the Soviet exhibit. That funny stepped building is the exhibit of the United Kingdom. There is the US exhibit, a geodesic dome designed by Buckminster, I think, was the guy who got into geodesic domes. Overall view. And now it's much later. You see, we're going past the exhibit of Israel, but it's now late fall of 1967. I've already been at work at General Motors for 6 months, and you had to be there for 6 months to get any vacation. And what we did with the vacation was go to Expo 67, a very major attraction. So we're driving back in our Morris Oxford to Montreal. This train was one of the high attractions. Exhibit was over a large area, so the train was nice to get around. Here you see the shadow of the car in which we're riding. And there's Mum sitting in it, very, very nice in the open air. A lot warmer than it was in February. That is the exhibit of the Soviet Union. At the time, the Soviet Union invested a lot of resources and things like that. They had a fashion show. This was of considerable interest because, don't forget, just a dozen years or so earlier, Stalin had the Soviet Union under the most dreadful tyranny. Something like this would never have occurred. So it was loosening up, and a lot of significance was attached to the fact that they would have good-looking females parading themselves in this manner, most un-Soviet-like by historical standards. And here we see the train again. I wouldn't be surprised if that is Mother's hair we see in the background. The geodesic dome that was the US exhibit. We are now lined up. We have less sunny fall weather, as you can see. And we're lined up for one of the most popular attractions at Expo 67. And that was the newly created Hovercraft. This was brand new technology at the time. There were none in service. It was a way of travelling over water in which it was neither a boat nor an aircraft, but it was riding not on water but on air. You had the engines that pushed air downwards so that the boat was pushed upwards, and it rode on a pocket of air. It's about 4 inches above the water. In rough water, it gave a fairly bumpy ride and could not achieve its maximum speed. It works best in very smooth water. but you see it goes pretty well. There's the exhibit of Canada in the background and the one of the UK. There's Mum on board the hovercraft, and this is what the people were lining up so long for. It was a long wait. You got a fairly short ride in the hovercraft, and then it went back and landed for the next bunch of people who were waiting. This was part of the British exhibit. The hovercraft was created and made in Britain. There was a lot more focus on national pride in those days than occurs today. And here is the hovercraft about to take off from land. And of course that was the other great benefit. It could go on water or land. Didn't really care what was underneath it, because there it's riding on top of the concrete, and now it's riding on top of the water. Today hovercrafts are in service, much larger ones, taking passengers across the English Channel. And with that, we come to the end of reel number 2.